Minji had always been the quiet type, not shy exactly, but someone who liked to think before speaking. In college, while other students raised their hands quickly to answer questions, Minji would carefully consider all angles before sharing her thoughts. Her professors noticed this thoughtfulness. "You don't say much," her business professor once told her, "but when you do speak, everyone listens." After graduating with her business degree, Minji applied to several companies. The day she got the call from Meridian Consulting, she jumped up and down in her tiny apartment. Meridian wasn't just any company, it was the company where ambitious people went to build incredible careers. Getting hired there, even for an entry-level job, felt like winning the lottery. On her first day, Minji arrived an hour early. The building was tall and made of glass that reflected the morning sun. Inside, everything looked expensive. The marble floors, the artwork on the walls, even the plants seemed fancier than normal plants. A security guard gave her a temporary badge, and Minji couldn't stop smiling as she clipped it to her carefully chosen outfit. "You must be the new hire," said a tall man with kind eyes as Minji stepped off the elevator. "I'm Raj, head of analytics. Welcome to the team." Minji's desk was small but neat, tucked in a corner with a decent view of the city. Her computer was already set up, and a welcome packet sat beside the keyboard. As other employees arrived, they nodded politely or introduced themselves. Everyone seemed busy and important. Except for one person. From across the office, a woman with perfectly styled hair watched Minji with narrow eyes. This was Diane, though Minji wouldn't learn her name until later that day when someone whispered it as a warning. "Been here 9 years," the whisper said. "Thinks she owns the place. Be careful around her." Minji tried not to worry about office politics. She focused instead on learning everything she could. She stayed late, asked smart questions, and volunteered for projects others avoided. Numbers made sense to Minji in a way people sometimes didn't. She could spot patterns in data that others missed, finding solutions hidden in spreadsheets and reports. 3 months into the job, Minji was asked to help with a small project for one of Meridian's biggest clients. The client loved her work. 6 months in, she was invited to join meetings she previously only prepared documents for. By the end of her first year, Raj was mentioning her name to upper management. "There's something special about her," he told the director of operations. "She sees connections nobody else does." Minji's second year at Meridian brought a promotion and a bigger desk, one with an even better view. Her salary increased, and so did her responsibilities. She now had a small team reporting to her, just 2 junior analysts, but it was a start. What Minji didn't notice, at least not right away, was how Diane watched her rising success with growing bitterness. Diane had been passed over for promotion 3 times. She'd been at Meridian longer than some of the executives. Yet here was this quiet newcomer, moving up faster than anyone had a right to. "It's not fair," Diane complained to anyone who would listen. "She's probably just telling the bosses what they want to hear. Or maybe she's getting special treatment for other reasons." She'd raise her eyebrows meaningfully when she said this. Minji first noticed something was wrong when people stopped chatting with her in the break room. Then she found herself uninvited from lunch outings. Small mistakes began appearing in her reports, mistakes she was certain she hadn't made. One afternoon, Minji overheard Diane talking in the bathroom. "Little Miss Perfect won't seem so perfect when her presentation crashes tomorrow," she was saying. "Sometimes these technical glitches just happen, don't they?" Minji felt her stomach tighten. The presentation tomorrow was for the company's biggest client. Rach had trusted her to lead it because of her deep understanding of the data. Walking back to her desk, Minji took a deep breath. She hadn't expected enemies at Meridian. She'd only wanted to do good work. Now, it seemed, her success had put a target on her back, and Diane was taking aim. The real battle was just beginning. Minji stayed at the office until midnight, checking and rechecking her presentation. She made backup copies on 3 different devices and even printed handouts just in case the projector failed. Something told her not to trust the office computer tomorrow. Morning came too quickly. Minji's eyes were tired, but her mind was sharp. She arrived 2 hours early and set up the conference room herself. When she plugged in her own laptop, instead of using the room's computer, she caught a glimpse of surprise on Diane's face as she passed by the glass door. The presentation went perfectly. The clients were impressed, nodding and taking notes. Raj beamed with pride from his seat at the back of the room. When the company CEO unexpectedly joined for the last 15 minutes, Minji didn't falter. She answered his questions with confidence, backing everything with solid data. "Excellent work," the CEO said afterward, shaking her hand. "Raj tells me you've been with us less than 2 years? Remarkable." Diane watched this exchange from across the room, her smile tight and fake. That afternoon, Minji found a sticky note on her desk. "Beginner's luck." The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the message was clear. What started as small acts of sabotage grew more obvious over the following weeks. Minji would arrive to find her chair mysteriously adjusted to uncomfortable heights. Files she needed would be misplaced. Her name was accidentally left off team emails about important meetings. "Did no one tell you about the budget meeting?" Diane asked with fake concern when Minji rushed in 15 minutes late. "I could have sworn I copied you on that email." Minji tried to rise above it. She worked harder, stayed later, and kept impressing the right people. But Diane was gathering allies. 2 other longtime employees who had also been passed over for promotions joined her campaign against Minji. The whispers grew louder. "She probably has connections," they'd say when Minji walked by. Why else would someone so junior get such important assignments? The break room fell silent whenever she entered. Lunch invitations stopped completely. Even people Minji thought were friends started avoiding eye contact in the hallways. The company retreat should have been a chance to reset relationships, to connect with colleagues outside the office pressure. Minji packed her most casual clothes and promised herself she'd try to build bridges. She never got the chance. On the first night, during a team dinner, someone passed around their phone. People looked at the screen, covered their mouths, and laughed. When the phone reached Minji, she froze. It was a photo of her, clearly taken without her knowledge while she was changing in what she thought was a private cabin. She wasn't exposed, she had a towel wrapped around herself, but the violation felt complete. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice shaking. No one admitted anything. Diane looked at her with mock sympathy. "Maybe be more careful where you change, sweetie." Minji left the table, locked herself in her cabin bathroom, and cried for the first time since starting at Meridian. She wanted to leave, to pack her bags and never come back, but something stubborn inside wouldn't let her give them that satisfaction. The final humiliation came during the annual board presentation. Minji had prepared for weeks, checking every number 3 times. This presentation could secure her next promotion, maybe even a department leadership role if it went well. 10 minutes before her slot, she discovered her slides had been altered. Key numbers were wrong. Graphs showed incorrect trends. There was no time to fix everything. "Something wrong?" Diane asked sweetly as Minji frantically tried to correct the worst mistakes. "You did this," Minji whispered, finally confronting her tormentor directly. Diane's smile never wavered. "Prove it." Minji did her best with the sabotage presentation. She explained discrepancies when she caught them, but she sounded defensive, unprepared. The board members exchanged concerned glances. Raj looked confused by her poor performance. Afterward, as Minji gathered her materials with shaking hands, she heard Diane's laughter floating down the hallway. It was the sound of victory, of a successful humiliation. Something broke inside Minji that day. Something that couldn't be fixed with hard work or determination. For the first time, she wondered if staying at Meridian was worth the pain. Minji couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned, replaying the disaster of the board presentation in her mind. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the confused and disappointed faces of the executives, heard Diane's laughter echoing in her ears. By morning, dark circles had formed under her eyes. She called in sick for the first time since joining Meridian. 1 day became 2, then 3. Her phone buzzed with messages from Raj asking if she was okay, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. On the 4th day, Minji forced herself to return. The moment she stepped off the elevator, she felt eyes on her. People whispered as she passed. In the break room, someone had taped a printout of a failing stock chart with her name written above it. "Don't let them see they've gotten to you," she whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders as she walked to her desk. A meeting request from Raj appeared in her inbox almost immediately. When she entered his office, his usually friendly face looked concerned. The board was disappointed with the presentation, he said carefully. They're questioning whether you're ready for more responsibility. Minji's throat tightened. The slides were tampered with. Someone changed my data before the presentation. Raj's expression softened with pity, which somehow hurt worse than anger would have. Minji, we can't start blaming others when things go wrong. That's not the kind of leadership we value here. But I'm telling the truth, she insisted, her voice cracking. Diane has been sabotaging my work for months. She's turned everyone against me. That's a serious accusation, Raj said, leaning back in his chair. Do you have any proof? Minji opened her mouth, then closed it. Of course she didn't have proof. Diane was too careful for that. I think you need some time to reflect, Raj said finally. Maybe this level of pressure isn't right for you right now. When she left his office, Minji noticed her hands were shaking. The walls of the hallway seemed to close in around her. Her breath came in short gasps. By the time she reached the bathroom, she was struggling to breathe properly. Minji locked herself in a stall, sliding down to sit on the floor as panic overwhelmed her. Her heart raced so fast she thought it might explode. The room spun around her. Was she dying? It felt like it. 20 minutes later, when she could finally breathe again, Minji realized this wasn't her first panic attack at Meridian. They'd been happening more frequently, before big meetings, after encounters with Diane, sometimes even on Sunday evenings when she thought about returning to work the next day. That weekend, Minji barely left her bed. She ignored calls from friends and family. Food lost its taste. Sleep came only in short, restless bursts. On Monday morning, she called in sick again. You've missed a week of work now, Raj said over the phone, his patience clearly wearing thin. We need to discuss your future at Meridian. Minji knew what that meant. She was being pushed out. All her hard work, her talent with numbers, her dedication, none of it mattered anymore. Diane had won. With shaking hands, Minji opened her laptop and navigated to the Human Resources page. Maybe there was still a way to fight this. The company had policies against harassment, didn't they? The HR director, a woman named Lynn, agreed to meet with her that afternoon. Minji spent hours preparing, writing down every incident she could remember, trying to think of any possible evidence. Lynn listened politely as Minji poured out her story, describing the months of isolation and sabotage. When she finished, Lynn closed her notebook and sighed. I understand you're upset, she said carefully, but without concrete evidence, there's not much I can do. Office politics can be challenging, especially for young professionals. Perhaps you need to develop more resilience. Minji stared at her in disbelief. Resilience? This isn't about politics. It's bullying, it's harassment, it's your word against a respected employee who's been here for 9 years, Lynn cut in. My advice? Focus on rebuilding your reputation after the board presentation. That's something concrete you can work on. Minji left the HR office feeling hollow. That night, she opened her laptop again, but this time she didn't look at company policies. Instead, she began typing a resignation letter. 2 days later, she placed the letter on Raj's desk before anyone else arrived at the office. She cleared her desk quickly, taking only her personal items and leaving her company badge behind. As the elevator doors closed on Meridian Consulting for what she thought was the last time, Minji felt something unexpected, relief, and beneath it, the first tiny spark of freedom. For 2 weeks after quitting Meridian, Minji barely left her apartment. She ignored calls from recruiters and deleted LinkedIn notifications without reading them. The thought of starting over at another company, possibly facing the same treatment, made her stomach churn. Her savings wouldn't last forever, though. One morning, as she stared at her dwindling bank account, her phone rang with an unknown number. Is this Minji Park? I'm Taiwan from TechFront Solutions. Your former professor recommended you for a position we're trying to fill. Minji almost declined the interview on the spot, but something in Tao's friendly voice made her hesitate. It's a small company, he continued when she didn't immediately respond. Just 12 people right now. We're building analytics software for small businesses who can't afford enterprise solutions. I'm not sure I'm what you're looking for, Minji said quietly. Just come talk to us, Tao insisted. No pressure. We're in the old warehouse district, nothing fancy like downtown. 2 days later, Minji stood outside a converted brick warehouse. The sign was small and unassuming. Tech Front Solutions. No gleaming glass towers, no marble lobby. Just a simple door with a handwritten note welcoming visitors to ring the bell. Inside, she found a space that looked more like a comfortable living room than an office. People worked at desks arranged in an open floor plan, but there were also couches, a well-used ping-pong table, and a small kitchen where someone was brewing coffee. Tao, a cheerful man with round glasses, greeted her with a warm handshake. "Our interview process is pretty simple," he explained. "We have a real problem we're trying to solve. We'd like you to take a look and tell us what you think." The problem was fascinating, a complex data set from a local grocery chain trying to predict inventory needs. Minji soon forgot her nervousness as she dug into the numbers. When she looked up, 2 hours had passed, and several employees had gathered around to listen to her ideas. "You see patterns I missed completely," said one woman, leaning forward with genuine interest. "We could implement this approach right away," added another, typing notes furiously. The salary Tao offered was lower than what she'd made at Meridian, and the title was a step down. But when Minjae looked around at the people watching her with respect in their eyes, she made her decision. "When can I start?" The first months at Tech Front were healing. For the first time since college, Minji felt valued for her skills rather than judged for office politics. When she suggested improvements to their core product, people actually listened. When she made mistakes, they were treated as learning opportunities, not failures. 6 months in, Minjae led her first client implementation, a small regional bank that needed better data analysis. The project was a huge success, bringing in referrals for 3 new clients. A year into her new job, Tao called Minjae into the small conference room they called the fishbowl because of its glass walls. "We're getting more client requests than we can handle," he said, spreading printouts across the table. "And they're specifically asking for your analytics framework." Minji looked at the growing list of potential clients. "We need to hire more people." Actually, Tao smiled. "I was thinking bigger than that. What if we package your approach as a standalone product? Something any business could implement without needing a consultant." Minji's eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. Not just a service, but a software platform, one built around her data analysis methods. They worked nights and weekends for 6 months. Minji coded until her fingers cramped while Tao handled the business side. When they launched DataClear at a regional tech conference, they didn't expect much attention. They were wrong. By the end of the first day, their booth was swarmed with interested businesses. By the end of the week, they had their first 50 customers. Within another year, Tech Front had grown to 30 employees. Minji now led the product development team, helping shape the company's vision. Her confidence had returned, stronger than before, because it was built on genuine achievement and respect. When industry publications began featuring Tech Front as a disruptor in business analytics, Minji sometimes thought about Meridian. Not with bitterness anymore, but with a strange sense of gratitude. If Diane hadn't driven her away, she might never have found her true path. She had no idea that path would eventually lead her right back to where it began. 3 years after Minji joined Tech Front, the company had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Their offices now occupied the entire converted warehouse, and they employed over 100 people. Minjae had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, working closely with Tao, who remained CEO. One rainy Tuesday morning, Tao called an unexpected meeting with the leadership team. His expression was more serious than usual as they gathered in the conference room that had replaced the old fishbowl. "I received an interesting call yesterday," he began, looking directly at Minjae, "from a member of the board at Meridian Consulting." Minji felt her stomach drop at the name. She hadn't thought about Meridian in months. "They're in trouble," Tao continued. "Their analytics division has been losing clients to more innovative competitors." He paused. "Competitors like us." Minji's mind raced. Were they threatening legal action? Did they think she had stolen proprietary information? "They want to discuss a potential partnership," Tao said, surprising everyone. "But I think they're actually fishing for an acquisition offer." The room fell silent. Tech Front acquiring Meridian? It seemed impossible. Meridian was a giant in the industry, or at least it had been. "Their stock has dropped 60% in the last 2 years," Tao explained, pulling up a chart on the screen. They'd failed to innovate, lost key clients, and their reputation is suffering. Meanwhile, our valuation has tripled since our last funding round. Minji stared at the numbers. Meridian was vulnerable. The company she had once thought unshakable was now struggling to survive. What do you think? Tao asked her directly. You know Meridian from the inside. Is this opportunity worth exploring? All eyes turned to Min Jae. Her history at Meridian wasn't a secret at TechFront. She'd been open about her experiences when recruiting team members, emphasizing the supportive culture they were building in contrast to toxic corporate environments. From a business perspective, she said slowly, their client list alone would be valuable. And they still have talented people there, despite the leadership problems. Tao nodded. We'll need to do full due diligence, of course. But I wanted your gut reaction before we proceeded. That evening, alone in her office, Minji scrolled through Meridian's public financial reports. The decline was even worse than Tao had indicated. Behind the numbers, she imagined the stress and fear employees must be feeling as the company faltered. Had Diane been fired yet? Was Rage still leading the analytics department? Minji realized she didn't care as much as she would have expected. Her life had moved forward, and Meridian had become just another struggling company in a competitive industry. Over the next month, TechFront's leadership team met repeatedly with Meridian's board members. Minji stayed in the background during these meetings, observing but rarely speaking. None of the board members seemed to recognize her, which wasn't surprising. She'd never been important enough to meet them during her time at Meridian. They're desperate, Tao told Minji after a particularly tense negotiation session. They tried to find other buyers, but no one's interested at their asking price. We have the upper hand here. Minji nodded. Their technical infrastructure is outdated. It will cost millions to integrate their systems with ours. True, Tao agreed. But their client relationships are still valuable, and some of their staff could be assets if they're willing to adapt to our culture. The final decision came down to a late-night discussion between Tao and Min Jae. They sat on the rooftop patio of the TechFront building, looking out at the city lights. If we do this, Tao said, you'll need to be directly involved in the restructuring. That means going back there, working with people who might remember you. Minji took a deep breath. I know. Are you okay with that? Be honest with me. We can walk away from this deal. Minji thought about the young analyst she had been, crying in a bathroom stall, feeling worthless and broken. She thought about how far she had come since then. I'm not the same person who left Meridian, she said finally. I'm ready. 3 days later, TechFront announced its acquisition of Meridian Consulting. The business press called it the most unexpected tech acquisition of the year. Industry analysts praised TechFront's bold move. What no one mentioned in any of the news stories was the irony that would soon become apparent to Meridian's employees. Their company's savior was someone they had once broken. Minji stood outside the gleaming glass doors of Meridian Consulting, her heart beating so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. 5 years had passed since she'd walked out of this building, believing she'd never return. Now she was back, not as an employee, but as an executive of the company that had acquired Meridian. Ready? Tao asked, standing beside her. Minji nodded, straightening her shoulders. She looked different now, more confident, her hair styled in a sleek bob instead of the long ponytail she'd worn before. She wondered if anyone would recognize her. The security guard did a double take as he issued her a visitor badge. Have you been here before, ma'am? He asked, squinting at her. A lifetime ago, Minji replied with a small smile. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt surreal. When the doors opened, Minji was greeted by Meridian's current CEO, a nervous-looking man named Philip who had been appointed just 6 months earlier to try to save the sinking company. Welcome to Meridian, he said, shaking their hands with forced enthusiasm. We're very excited about this new chapter. The morning was filled with meetings and introductions. Most of Meridian's senior leadership team was new. They'd had high turnover as the company struggled. Minji recognized only a few faces, mostly people from departments she hadn't worked closely with. During a break between meetings, Minji excused herself and wandered down to the analytics department, her old home. The layout had changed, but the energy felt familiar. People hunched over computers, stress visible in their postures. "Can I help you?" A young woman approached, clearly noticing Minji's visitor badge. "Just getting reacquainted with the building," Minji explained. "I'll be working closely with your team during the transition." The woman nodded politely and returned to her desk. As Minji turned to leave, she froze. Across the room, emerging from what must be a manager's office, was Raj. He looked older, his hair now sprinkled with gray, his face more lined than she remembered. He glanced up, caught her eye, and stopped mid-step. Recognition dawned slowly on his face. "Minji?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. "Minji Park." Conversations around them quieted as people sensed something interesting happening. "Hello, Raj," Minji said calmly, that her heart was racing. "It's been a while." He approached slowly, as if approaching a ghost. "You're with TechFront? I saw the acquisition announcement, but I never made the connection." "I'm the Chief Operating Officer," Minji said. "I'll be overseeing the integration of our companies." The silence around them grew heavier as employees began to whisper to each other. Minji could imagine what they were saying. The quiet analyst who had left years ago was now returning as their boss. We should catch up," Raj stammered. "My office is just—" "Actually," Minji interrupted gently, "I need to get back to my meetings, but we'll have plenty of time to talk during the transition." As she turned to leave, a familiar laugh echoed from the break room. Minji's stomach tightened instinctively at the sound. She didn't need to look to know who it belonged to. But she looked anyway. Diane stood in the break room doorway, coffee mug in hand, still mid-laugh at something a colleague had said. She hadn't noticed Minji yet. Her hair was different, shorter with expensive highlights, but her expression was the same, slightly superior, secretly cruel. For a moment, Minji was transported back to her last days at Meridian, to the panic attacks and humiliation. Her breath caught in her throat. Then Diane turned and saw her. The coffee mug slipped from Diane's hand, shattering on the floor. Coffee splashed her expensive shoes, but she didn't seem to notice. Her face drained of color. "No," Diane whispered, just loud enough for Minji to hear. "It can't be you." Minji felt a strange calm settle over her. This moment, watching the realization dawn on Diane's face that the person she had tormented was now in a position of power over her, was something she had never imagined possible. "Hello, Diane," Minji said, her voice steady. "Looks like you've made a mess. You should clean that up before someone gets hurt." Without waiting for a response, Minji walked past her former bully, back toward the executive floor where important decisions about Meridian's future and its employees would soon be made. Behind her, the whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the office. By tomorrow, everyone at Meridian would know. The woman they'd once broken had returned to remake the company in her image. For the next 2 weeks, Minji threw herself into learning everything about the current state of Meridian. She reviewed performance reports, interviewed department heads, and analyzed client feedback. The company had good bones but had lost its way under poor leadership. During this time, she noticed Diane watching her from a distance, always finding reasons to be elsewhere when Minji entered a room. The whispers continued. Some employees approached Minji privately, sharing stories about Diane's behavior over the years. It seemed Minji hadn't been her only target. "She made my first year here miserable," confessed one young analyst. "I almost quit 3 times." Minji nodded, remembering her own pain. "Why did you stay?" "I needed the job," the analyst said simply, "and I kept hoping someone would notice what was happening." That night, Minji couldn't sleep. The acquisition deal was nearly complete. Soon she would need to make decisions about restructuring, which meant deciding who would stay and who would go. The thought of having that power over Diane was both satisfying and uncomfortable. "What would you do?" she asked Tao over lunch the next day. "Fire her immediately," he said without hesitation. "From what you've told me, and what we've learned during the transition, she's a toxic influence." Minji played with her fork. "Wouldn't that look like personal revenge?" "Who cares how it looks?" Tao countered. "It's a sound business decision. Leaders like that drive away talent." Maybe he was right, but something about taking the easy path of revenge didn't sit well with Minji. She had built TechFront's culture on fairness and respect, values she had longed for at Meridian. 2 days later, as Minji reviewed personnel files in the conference room, there was a knock at the door. She looked up to find Diane standing there, pale but determined. "Can I speak with you?" Diane asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Minji's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Come in." Diane sat across from her, hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I know what you're going to do," Diane finally said, "and I don't blame you." Minji raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I've been looking at job listings all week," Diane continued. "But with Meridian's reputation right now," and she swallowed hard, "my age, it's not looking good." Was this a plea for mercy? Minji studied the woman who had once seemed so powerful and threatening. Now she just looked tired and afraid. "Why did you do it?" Minji asked, the question she'd carried for 5 years. "Why did you work so hard to hurt me?" Diane looked down at her hands. "You were moving up so fast. I've been stuck in the same position for years, passed over repeatedly. When they started talking about you having executive potential," she shook her head. "I was jealous and scared." The admission hung in the air between them. "That doesn't excuse what I did," Diane added quietly. "I know that." Minji thought about the culture she wanted to build at the new combined company. Could someone like Diane ever be part of that? "I've been reviewing reports from HR," Minji said, pulling a folder from the stack in front of her. "There have been 3 formal complaints about your behavior in the last year alone." Diane's face flushed. "I can explain." "I don't need explanations," Minji interrupted. "I need a workplace where people feel safe and valued." She opened the folder, revealing printouts of emails and meeting notes. "This isn't about our history, Diane. It's about your pattern of behavior that continues to this day." Minji closed the folder and looked directly at her former tormentor. "I believe people can change, but they have to want to change." "I do," Diane said quickly. "I can be different." Minji shook her head slowly. "Perhaps, but not here, not at this company." The decision was made. Not from a place of revenge, but from a commitment to building something better than what had come before. The next morning, 15 employees received notice that their positions were being eliminated in the restructuring. Diane was among them. The reasons given were professional and factual, no mention of personal history, no hint of revenge. As news of the changes spread through the office, Minji called the remaining employees together. Standing before them, some familiar faces, some new, she felt a sense of completion. "The past is behind us," she told them. "Today, we start building a company where excellence and kindness aren't competing values, but essential partners. I know what it's like to work in fear. I promise you won't have to do that anymore." Looking out at their hopeful, uncertain faces, Minji felt the last pieces of her old pain finally fall away. The true poetic justice wasn't firing someone who had hurt her, it was creating the workplace she had always deserved.